Hello again, and welcome to the UMDF Research Infrastructure Panel discussion. Shortly, we will hear brief updates from the principal investigators associated with a handful of critical research infrastructure projects for mitochondrial disease. These projects aim to improve the diagnosis of mitochondrial disease, facilitate the development of treatments and cures for mitochondrial disease, and optimize clinical care of our mitochondrial disease patients. These goals are perfectly aligned with the UMDF roadmap for how we progress our research mission. I'm really excited today to hear from each of these leaders. UMDF is very proud to financially support in part or in whole all of these projects. And we know that there are a lot of really important updates to be shared with the community. With that, we're going to start with the North American Mitochondrial Disease Consortium. It's a clinical research network. Unfortunately, Dr. Hirano is unable to join us live today, but Dr. Hirano was kind enough to pre-record a brief update on the Namdaq project, and we're going to present that to you now before we come back with the remainder of the updates.
Hello, my name is Michio Hirano, and I'm a professor of neurology at the Columbia University Irving Medical Center. I'm pleased to talk to you today about Namdaq, the North American Mitochondrial Disease Consortium. I am the clinical principal investigator of Namdaq and work closely with Dr. Seamus Thompson, who's the statistical PI, and Dr. Xiomara Rosales, who's the project manager. Namdaq is one of 20 NIH-funded research consortia that comprise the Rare Disease Clinical Research Network. This RDCRN network is supported by the Data Management and Coordinating Center located at Cincinnati Children's Medical Center. Namdaq is comprised of 16 sites scattered across North America. The foundation of Namdaq is its clinical registry, which has enrolled more than 1,700 subjects. These participants have a diverse range of clinical diagnoses, including many of the classic mitochondrial syndromes such as Lee syndrome, MELAS, Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, Guillain-Sayers, and others. However, the two most frequent diagnoses are multisystemic disease and other clinical diagnoses, and many of those individuals lack a genetic diagnosis. Thus, the registry points out the need for further clinical investigations to define these disorders and further genetic investigation to identify the causes of these conditions. The demographics reveals a biphasic distribution. First peak is of children with onset of disease before age 2, and the second peak is of adults. The adult patients predominantly have pathogenic mitochondrial DNA mutations, whereas the early onset patients predominantly have autosomal recessive mutations due to nuclear gene defects. These nuclear gene defects are diverse. There are 65 different nuclear genes represented in the registry, and a majority of those genes are represented by a single patient, thus highlighting the diversity and rarity of these nuclear gene defects. The data in the Namdaq registry has been useful for the pharmaceutical industry, who is data mined in their investigation of mitochondrial disease. Namdaq has conducted surveys, including 2 surveys on the diagnostic odyssey of patients with mitochondrial disease. First survey revealed that on average, patients see more than 8 clinicians before receiving their mitochondrial disease diagnosis. And the majority of those received at least one non-mitochondrial diagnosis prior to the mitochondrial disease diagnosis. A follow-up survey has been administered, and please stay tuned for results of those, which will be coming out shortly. Namdaq has sponsored pilot projects, and 5 are highlighted here. Namdaq is proud of the Namdaq Fellowship Program directed by Dr. Richard Haas at the University of California, San Diego. This fellowship program has trained 6 individuals, all of whom are still active doing mitochondrial research and taking care of patients with mitochondrial disease. In addition, 2 new fellows will be starting later this year. Together with the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, Namdaq has started a Gateway Awards program to encourage students to participate in mitochondrial research. And the first 5 were funded this past year and are listed here. I'd like to highlight one of these, Kevin Wangsidero, who was a master's student at the Mailman School of Public Health in New York. He obtained data on mitochondrial disease patients who responded to a COVID-19 survey sent to members of the RDCRN Consortia, and this survey was administered by the DMCC. 3 main questions were asked among subjects with mitochondrial disease: how many had COVID-19? Second was access to healthcare hampered by the pandemic? And third, of those who reported COVID-19 symptoms, how many obtained COVID-19 screening? This survey was conducted between May 8th and December 10th, 2020, so relatively early in the pandemic. And the results showed that only a small number of patients, 3 out of the 179 respondents, reported having COVID. However, a large majority, 84% of the respondents, reported that the COVID-19 pandemic had disrupted their healthcare. Furthermore, a large number, 122 out of the 179 patients, or about 68%, reported having at least one symptom suggestive of COVID-19. However, the majority could not be tested for COVID-19. A follow-up survey is being administered. So again, stay tuned for follow-up information. Finally, Namdaq has 5 major projects ongoing. Project 1 is continuation of the clinical registry. Project 2 is genomic testing for molecularly undefined registry cases led by Dr. Amel, Karaa at Massachusetts General Hospital. Project 3, led by Dr. Johan von Hove at the University of Colorado, is to develop functional assays for mitochondria for the diagnosis of these conditions using minimally invasive tissues, predominantly skin biopsies. Project 4 is led by Dr. Jerry Bedoyan, who's performing advanced genetic studies and piloting newborn screening for disorders of pyruvate metabolism. Project 5 focuses on deoxynucleoside therapy for thymidine kinase 2 and is currently assessing a activity meter assay as an outcome measure for this therapy. As you can see, Namdaq is very active and will continue to push forward with mitochondrial disease research through our academic centers. I thank you for your attention.
Okay, now we turn to Dr. Marni Falk, who is the principal investigator on the Mitochondrial Disease Sequence Data Resource Consortium. Dr. Falk is going to provide an update on MSeqDR, and then we'll move on to the next project. Dr. Falk.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Phil, for having us present this year. I would like to share with you some disclosures that I'm a scientific advisory board member on the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation and several other foundations and or corporate entities, as well as I'm a research collaborator, consultant, and or PI on a range of activities related to therapeutic development in mitochondrial disease. It's been a wonderful ride working with the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation since 2012 to conceive of, and then in 2014 to launch the Mitochondrial Disease Sequence Data Resource website. This is the landing page now that exists for either clinicians or informaticians to come and utilize a community resource that is really public and fully funded by the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation in order to allow researchers and clinicians to better understand the genetics and clinical features of an enormous breadth of genes and variants that cause mitochondrial disease, as well as to analyze data from individuals with mitochondrial disease in the hopes of identifying diagnostics or diagnostic answers and better understanding of disease. This is a summary of just the last 5 years of usage in Google Analytics from all the people around the world that you can see have come. The number of sessions are in pink. The number of users that are new each over this time, each coming to the site, are shown from many different countries. Of course, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and India are our top uses, but you can see that it really has an international reach. This shows you that on average, we have several thousand hits constantly, sometimes going up to over 10,000 views of our pages at a given time. And you can also see that, interestingly, an enormous amount of use is given to the phenotypic information about the different syndromes and diseases and the features that comprise them of several hundred different mitochondrial disease. That said, the genomic tools and the analyses of mitochondrial DNA and of nuclear genes are also very commonly utilized. Over the last year, we published, and it's now broadly available, a compendium to be a partner for MSeqDR that lists knowledge about mitochondrial disease from a gene perspective. In this compendium, we cover over 250 different mitochondrial disease genes in both nuclear and mitochondrial DNA genomes. And together with over a dozen colleagues, we reviewed all of the literature on these genes and describe in a sort of one-stop shop the inheritance patterns, the ages of the patients that might be affected, the clinical features and clinical pearls, what therapies might be available for each type of gene disorder, the different support groups around the world, and of course the research underway. And we're already working on the next edition to review more than 100 additional genes that may cause mitochondrial disease. And importantly, all of the gene pages link to pages in MSeqDR where the updated variant information is available. One of the newer projects that we're really excited to take part of is to be able to extend to families the opportunity to control how their genomic data can be analyzed and shared to better understand mitochondrial disease. This is again another partnership between MSeqDR and MitoShare, where families can enroll in the MitoShare platform to indicate their willingness to share their genomic data, and will then be linked to a study that I am a principal investigator of through the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to set up the process whereby the consents can be signed, the genomic data can be released from clinical laboratories or research laboratories, global identifiers that protect all private information will be applied, and then the work is done behind the scenes to get the data into a system that the doctors or researchers around the world that the family selects can actually analyze the data themselves in very easy to use tools. So this is really to facilitate understanding of diagnostics and solve unsolved cases, and also to recognize there's value of this data to understand why specific types of mitochondrial disease might be variable or certain modifier effects. So it's really a perfect partnership between the infrastructure that we've built for geneticists and scientists and researchers and families who really want to put their data in a safe way to be analyzed by the people whom they feel most comfortable with. This is one of the platforms that we're using that's enabling this process. It's a platform built by colleagues at the National Institutes of Health and the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia called Kavatica, which is an open access, cloud-based data analysis platform that was created in partnership with 7 Bridges as part of the Precision Medicine Initiative to enable clinicians and scientists to rapidly access large amounts of raw genomic data and portable, shareable, and reproducible workflows to discover shared mutations or characteristics across many different diseases. It's really a warehouse for the genomic data that gets beyond institutional firewalls, allows data to be moved between clinical labs and research, and allows the data then to be moved into MSeqDR. These are really fabulous apps that exist to annotate the data and analyze it to be able to move it forward. One of the systems that we've invested a lot of time in the past year under the guidance of Dr. Zhao Gai at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles is to work with colleagues, Dr. Ignacio Medina and his team in England to take the open CGA platform that they have built for the 100,000 UK Genomes Project and to integrate it with a system called IVA, so that when we get the genomic data from our families that has already been generated, it will go from Cavatica into this system, whereby any doctor or scientist who's given permission can identify the subject, if the subject shares their identifier with them, and can start to query what genes and variants might actually be causing the disease before them. It is really very powerful to look at the quality of the data, to browse variants directly by the doctors and scientists that know the patients best, and to even interpret the data and ultimately to generate research reports. So we're really excited about this system. It's taken a lot of programming behind the scenes, but we're hoping to launch it this summer. Another major activity of the MSeqDR team, together with really more than 50 experts around the world, has been to work on gene and variant curation processes and implementation for Lee syndrome. I'm very happy to report that just last month, the group finished the curation and has completely reviewed, as you can see on the bottom, 113 genes to determine the pathogenicity and how much evidence there is in the literature that any one gene does or doesn't cause Lee syndrome. It required consensus definitions of Lee syndrome spectrum disorders and very intensive data review by biocurators in both the academic setting and in biotech at genomic laboratories, working together to follow the NIH ClinGen system supported by a U24 grant. And we're hopeful to move from this in the future, from not just curating genes that cause Lee syndrome, but to now to take this process and this experience to curate all the genes that cause mitochondrial disease, which we think will be pivotal to decide which patients might qualify for clinical trials based upon it being a primary mitochondrial disease trial, if that is what is intended. And again, you can see that for some variants, there's quite a lot of information, for some genes, forgive me, quite a lot of association, and for others, not as much. So I'd like to end our brief update by inviting the scientific community to join us. We have monthly MSeqDR Consortium update calls for the scientific community, the fourth Monday of each month from noon to 1 p.m. And Elizabeth McCormick is one of our top fearless leaders who helps coordinate us and keep us moving forward. We've been meeting together now for 9 years, and really this is the time when we really try to update the community and take feedback and listen to new project ideas and priorities. And so I'm delighted to share sort of the development team photos. These are the people that meet really tirelessly every month, actually multiple times per month, to continue to try to make MSeqDR highly useful to the global community to understand mitochondria and mitochondrial disease from both a genomic and a clinical phenotype perspective. And I'm very grateful to the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, who has been supporting our bioinformatician, the fabulous Dr. Li Shuang Shen at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, who has built this entire system and works tirelessly to make it useful to clinicians and researchers. I'm also grateful, of course, to the other funding sources, including our institutions and the NIH. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marni. A lot of exciting updates from the past year. And I know UMDF is really excited to be able to partner with MSeqDR and use MitoShare, the new patient-populated registry that we're just launching, to really help to drive the data, the genomic data that's going to make these tools all that much more valuable. So look forward to those continued interactions.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, let's move on to our third speaker. That's Dr. Sumit Parikh from the Cleveland Clinic. Dr. Parikh is going to provide an update on the Mitochondrial Care Network, MCN. Sumit?
Hello, everybody. I'm here to talk very briefly and provide an update on the Mitochondrial Care Network and where things are since we launched. The Mitochondrial Care Network is a joint project between the Mitochondrial Medicine Society, Mito Action, and the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. Our goal is to improve and optimize mitochondrial disease care by providing a team of providers at expert centers across the country that are somewhat vetted. You can go to mitonetwork.org and see what sites we have as part of our network and learn a little bit more about what we're doing. And for today, I am just going to provide some highlights. We are not going to go through everything in a lot of detail. We launched in 2018, fortunately, before the pandemic, which allowed us to make some good accomplishments, including get all of our sites online, launch some pilot projects, start a discussion board for clinicians so we could talk about our patients and patient care questions together, start tracking our patients so that we know who is who and what kind of patients we're all seeing at every site, as well as determine what the needs of all of our sites are. As we move forward past that first year, we developed a patient guide for the newly diagnosed, which is available on the website. We talked about and gathered a lot of information on launching a telehealth network, which I'm going to touch on in just a little bit. And we started work on an education portal in partnership with the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation and the Mitochondrial Medicine Society called MitoU. At that point, that had not been launched yet. And then, of course, COVID came about and really did, unfortunately, slow a lot of things down because a lot of the people volunteering to help move things forward for us are clinicians, and clinicians got extremely, extremely busy or pulled to other tasks during COVID. And so 2020 and early 2021 had really been tough as far as getting things to the next step. The first hope we had was having a coordinator, and we looked hard and far and wide for a coordinator. In fact, we almost hired one when that person decided that this position was not optimal for them because they could now work remotely from home as COVID launched, and they no longer needed our type of position for this. And then we had another coordinator actually vetted and hired, and she had a variety of family issues, including family illness, come up that led to her having to leave the position. So right now we remain without a coordinator, and our first and foremost focus right now is going to be on getting a coordinator hired, because without this coordinator, we will not be able to move the projects forward in the speed that we want. As far as what we were able to continue to work on, I will touch on the telehealth project again and let you know where things are. We continue to work on the Mitochondrial University project, and it was actually launched. And if you go to or just Google MitoU, you will get there. And there is both a clinician arm for this, as well as a parent and family arm that provides mitochondrial disease education. And then Dr. Karaa, who's co-director with me, will talk to you a little bit about the database that we plan on participating in, which Dr. Falk already talked about. So before COVID and before telehealth was so prevalent, we really thought it would be a great idea to be able to offer telehealth in a form of a network of expert providers for our mitochondrial disease families and patients, especially the ones who could not get to a mitochondrial center. As you all know, with COVID, things really moved quickly and in a good way in regards to telehealth availability and accessibility. And so now all sites are using telehealth. So now we just need to know, what do we do for new families, new patients as we move forward? Unfortunately, the laws around this are still evolving and changing. Things that have been allowed because of the pandemic may go away. And we really need to see how things shake out by the end of 2021 into 2022. And then depending on where things are, we will potentially need a separate network of our own that will offer telehealth services. But so there will be more to come. But until then, until we know more and where things stand, we're going to put hit the pause button on this. MitoU, I already touched on. We plan to provide expert lectures and educational resources for clinicians from the MitoCare network side, so that any provider that you might have regionally or locally who does not know about mitochondrial disease can take some time, go online, earn some education credits, but also hopefully provide better care for your child or family member. And the UMDF is actively also updating and working on and growing a portal for families and patients to educate themselves. And this has been a wonderful project to be a part of, and we're thrilled to see it come to life. And the website is really great. And then last but not least, the way we know we're going to optimize care for our patients is by gathering information and data from them and learning from them. And because we have over 20 institutions countrywide, we know that sometimes this can be a challenge. And we are very hopeful that by partnering with the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, as they participate in MitoShare and what's known as the Matrix platform, that we will be able to gather the kind of information we need to move things forward as far as optimizing care. And so I'm going to let Dr. Karaa speak about this on the next slide.
Thank you, Dr. Parikh. And so we're very excited for MitoShare to launch. As you have heard from Dr. Yeske, MitoShare is going to be the UMDF patient registry. And as such, we are inviting all patients with mitochondrial disease and their caregivers to go and register. The idea is that for each patient, we would like to obtain consent for the registry to access the medical record, the electronic health record of the patients, and also tell us who their provider is. And with that, we are hoping to eliminate the burden of having physicians or patients enter their own data themselves, which can be a tedious and time-consuming process. But if we get consent directly from the patient, we can access all of that information either through the MitoCare network sites in the first phase, and then in the second phase also reach out to other community patients that may not be seen in MitoCare network sites, but that would be also a way for us to know where they are and invite them to be part of our network. So the way this is going to work is that patient or caregiver is going to approve access through MitoShare to their electronic health record, and then from their data abstraction is going to feed back into the MitoShare. And what we're hoping is that not only the Mito patients enrolling in MitoShare are going to identify their MitoCare network sites, but we are also going to refer patients from our MitoCare network sites into engaging with MitoShare. So it's all going to be working in a symbiotic way, we hope, and is going to help us better understand and better serve our patients.
Perfect. So moving forward, we really do hope that we get a coordinator hired by end of year. We know that there have been staffing difficulties, not just in the medical field, but even outside of the medical field. So this really is where we're going to divert our energy. The other items are things that we had outlined as key needs that we are going to start moving forward once we have that coordinator hired. And these are things that I really hope to be able to provide you more information on as we move forward with the Mitochondrial Care Network. And I just want to say thank you to Dr. Karaa for helping with this, as well as all of our sites and the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, Brian Harmon and Phil Yeske, for all of their support with this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumit. Again, a project that's really poised to take off, and many times it requires the right tool or tools being in place to make that happen. I know you've worked hard in a really challenging time to get to this point, and we thank you for the efforts you've made there. And yeah, look forward to now really bringing clinicians and patients together, share the data, and advance that goal of optimizing clinical care. Our final speaker is Dr. Amel from Mass General Hospital, and she's going to speak to us about the Translational Research Advancing Therapy in Mitochondrial Diseases Consortium, or Treat Mito. Amel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Phil. I'm going to talk to you about something a little different, which is how to advance clinical trials in the mitochondrial disease community field. So as as a clinician myself and a clinical trialist, I have seen that there has been a tremendous interest in from companies and industry for drug development in mitochondrial disease. And I have also seen firsthand the challenges that we are faced in trying to design and implement clinical trials. And so part of this initiative is really to try to make that easier on everyone. These are my disclosures and disclaimers. I work with different entities, including pharmaceutical companies. And what you have heard earlier are updates from the different stakeholders that we have within our community. So you've heard from the clinician and the MitoCare network sites. You've heard from the research consortia. Phil and the UMDF spoke to you about the patient advocacy group, but we also interact with other entities, including professional societies, researchers, industry, legislators, and federal bodies. And when a company is interested or an academician is interested in starting a clinical trial for mitochondrial disease, in general, discussions start happening between these entities. So right now, efforts have been too slow and scattered and not very scalable. And conversations have been done within small groups. Companies sometimes have similar goals with quite different strategies that they use to attain those goals, and sometimes use the same group of patients. And we know that we don't have unlimited number of patients, and we have to be mindful that we are inducing a lot of study fatigue in our patient, and we need a better way of trying to engage our community for clinical trial development. And this is just in the US. I'm not even talking about all the other international efforts that are undergoing similar challenges. So rather than attacking each disease or helping each industry partner individually, a clinical trial platform or a clinical trial entity can unify us into a single network where we can share data, best practices, knowledge, and preparedness for clinical trial. And that will show a strong presence and a strong support when we go to engage with regulatory agencies. So we need to better self-organize. And in partnership with the UMDF, we thought about creating this entity called Translational Research Advancing Therapy in Mitochondrial Disease, which in short is Treat Mito. And we feel that this unified entity is going to advise companies and provide the resources for clinical trial planning, design, and implementation, which has become really an urgent need to avoid expert burnout, squandering the resources that we have, and overburdening our patients, families, and caregivers. And so the idea is really to leverage all the resources that we have available right now and make it work together and collaborate into a pipeline that leverages all the strengths that we have around. So you've heard about Mitochondrial, NAMDC, MSeqDR, MCN, the MMS. All of these can work together to try to enhance our clinical trial preparedness, implementation, and hopefully successful clinical trial to find that cure. And so how do we engage a pipeline like this to be readily deployed and quickly engaged without delays? When we started, our short-term goals were really to understand what the landscape is. So we started with the patients and the caregivers. We wanted to hear what they thought about having a clinical trial, what they wanted to see, how they wanted to be engaged. And so next we talked to pharmaceutical companies and our industry partner, because a clinical trial consortium can only be successful if it provides meaningful resources and services to these companies. And we wanted to create an infrastructure that was responsive to these immediate needs and will help foster strong partnership among us and industry and academia. We are also now in the process of inventorying the available scientific and clinical resources within the community, which not only include research capabilities, but also clinical trial readiness and capabilities. And what became very clear is that we were sitting on a wealth of information from prior clinical trial that we needed to tap into, because we have been doing all these clinical trials, and a low-hanging fruit was really to take advantage of all the data that we gathered. So how can we gather that data in a retrospective manner from all the trials that have already done that have been already done, but also moving forward prospectively think about how to leverage that data. For this, we collaborated with the Critical Path Institute, which is an FDA-funded agency, to use their Rare Disease Cures Accelerator data and analytic platform as the platform where the mitochondrial disease clinical trial data can be stored, accessed, curated, and analyzed to help guide us to the further understanding what clinical trials for mitochondrial disease need and how we can improve them. We also developed a Treat Mito charter, and we started with a small governance board, which is now expanding to a bigger international board. We have a new logo that is here. We have created a website, www.treatmito.org, and more information will be forthcoming to populate this site. And our long-term goal is really to create the centralized ecosystem of collaborators, resources, and data associated with multiple mitochondrial disease initiatives within the community, so we can leverage all the data and all the wonderful resources that we have, but also try to work together in this community sandbox that we call Mito Nexus, where everyone can input data from different sources, can have different access to curate the data, analyze it, and really use it with collaboration with industry, academia, and other researchers to use it to provide regulatory agency with the data that they need for protocol approvals, allow us to build better, more robust clinical trial, engage more clinical trial sites, and get to those clinical trials from which the data will feed back into this database and again into the Mito Nexus. So I hope that this is going to be a collaborative effort. I would like everyone to really reach out and tell us what your needs are, help you get the best out of our community resources. And with that, I will end. Thank you to all the people that I've spoken to and who have helped and guided all the choices that we've made, the UMDF for stewarding this and really supporting this financially and otherwise. And this is my email. If you need to email me directly, please go ahead. You can also access us by sending us information through the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Amel. This is really about extracting maximum value out of every data point, whether it's patient-derived, clinician-derived, from a clinical trial. It's ensuring in a rare disease space that we get the most for every data point. And we're at this point now where earlier today we've heard a number of updates on clinical trials and studies that are moving forward. It's only going to reinforce the need to collect these data and be able to understand them and drive future research questions. So thank you for your efforts on getting Treat Mito up and running. So with that, we have a few minutes to just talk with the panelists. And again, unfortunately, Dr. Hirano not able to join us. But one of the things what we heard through each of these is the importance of being able to compare research databases and know where data resides and who it belongs to. And GUIDs have been mentioned multiple times. And so for many in our audience, that may be a new term, a global unique identifier. Amel, I'm going to kind of start with you. Speak to the importance of having GUIDs to be able to bring these data together so that they're not sitting in silos.
Yeah, so GUID is really a way of trying to understand who the data belongs to in a de-identified fashion. So instead of recognizing that a set of data belongs to a patient by name, it belongs to a code, and that code would be the same no matter where that patient data ends up, whether it's in MCN or MSeqDR or NAMDaq or Treat Mito. And the importance of that is that, as I said, we have a limited number of patients. And so if that same patient is registered within Namdaq and has genetic data in MSeqDR and is being seen in MCN site and has been in 2 clinical trials, we can gather all that information from that same individual into one database, and we can tell over time how that patient fared, how they responded to a certain treatment over time, and that is very important to be able to really assess data in a longitudinal fashion for each individual patient, but also in an aggregate fashion. So GUID is a very important step forward to try to harmonize all our resources.
And again, it just reinforces that these aren't individual projects that have walls in between them, but rather they're cohesive. And where GUIDS is just another way to help make these projects more cohesive so that we're bringing all the data together in the right way. You know, Marni, maybe and quickly from your side, a lot of effort's gone into developing the tools for genomic analysis. We're now at this point where we're ready to drive data in there. You know, what are your hopes for the next 5 years for a project like MSeqDR and what it may be able to enable for the mitochondrial disease community?
Sure. I think already we've been very excited, you know, that it's provided a place where we sort of elevate the expectations for how data should be analyzed and interpreted, really sharing standards and consensus. It's provided for professionals, geneticists, physicians, researchers, a place where there could be centralized information, knowledge, and tools. So I think it's built the international community, right? We've had hundreds of 250,000 users in the last 5 years. So I think that's super, or usage, that's very exciting to us. I think another exciting thing is that it improves the credibility of the data. So when a laboratory around the world, you know, has a new variant that they might find, they can go and analyze it either in the mitochondrial DNA. We partner closely with MitoMap that our colleague Dr. Wallace has been curating for 3 decades to manually evaluate the mitochondrial DNA variants. We provide information on nuclear gene variants, and now we have expert panels where you can go in and see what the consensus is. So it's one place to go get the information that you need. I think to answer your question, where are we going? I hope that we're finally at the threshold of allowing families to participate, that we're allowing them to directly control getting their data, making it really easy for them to put that data in so they don't have to carry it on a dongle at a meeting and ask somebody to look at it.
Right.
You know, not everybody has the tools to query data. And sometimes the informaticians analyzing the data are very far away from the person who knows the patient, the researcher or the doctor. So I think it's really exciting. And I'm hopeful that over the next few years, we'll be able to create more tools that hopefully allow the families to also participate in some of the analytics. I think, again, we had to really get the community, the scientific clinician community up to speed. But as we move forward, and I think what Dr. Karaa said is really spot on. We don't necessarily have to have the family give us any clinical information at all, because if it's linked to a GUID, we'll know that the data can come from what they put into the Mito share registry, or we'll be sure, you know, if there's other data that it can be linked together to inform the person analyzing their data. So I think it's really a super exciting time. We've all been dreaming of this for a really long time, making it easy for people to query the data without having to learn how to code it. And so I think we're really on the threshold of sort of the next level of solving the unsolved. And I think that's critical, because how do you get into the clinical trials if nobody knows what your condition is, right? You may not qualify. So it's really urgent that we continue to work to solve the unsolved and continue to learn. And the data is also very useful once you're in the trial to figure out, are some people more likely to have a genetic variant that might make them at high risk for getting a certain medication? Can we do pharmacogenomics? So I really think this will enhance the community's capacity.
Yeah, we've heard that message over and over again throughout the panel discussions today about the importance of having these patients well characterized genotypically as well as phenotypically in order to run the best trial. So I know this is an important part of making that happen. Sumit, I'm going to end with you, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of time, but one of the key outcomes from the Mitochondrial Disease Community Registry, the registry that UMDF ran between 2014 and 2020 before we decided to pause and really strengthen our registry platform and relaunching now as MitoShare, was the importance of clinician-patient interactions, right? And how to make that relationship even stronger. Maybe you could just briefly comment on how the ability of clinicians and patients to kind of come together on a registry platform might advance that. It could be through surveys, perhaps, or maybe you have other ideas about ways both sides can kind of learn from each other.
No, absolutely, Phil. I think, one of the biggest challenges is communication. And communication between clinicians who, even though we get to see each other once a year at meetings, don't necessarily have the ability or time or space to be able to communicate routinely day in, day out. And also communication between families to be able to share what's working, what's not with their care, what is helping, what's not helping, what might be one site, what is something one site is doing better than others that other people could learn from and maybe extrapolate and move over. And so, we know that the MitoCare network is the foundation is just, let's bring these clinicians together, let's get them talking, let's provide them a forum to discuss things. And so we're very happy to say at least that has started happening. And yes, it's definitely low-hanging fruit, but it's good that we were able to grab it. And I think the team that's already working on this as far as the network goes is very happy that this has happened. And they know that even if this was all we could accomplish, that this is something that we should keep in play. However, we really do want to aim bigger and have a much grander scope. And I think the ability to get all this cross-pollination to allow for the diagnostics to move into optimizing treatment and to move towards optimal clinical trials, I think is really that glue that we need. And I think that's where we're headed. So I think we've all got our fingers crossed and are really hoping that, yeah, we are at that precipice. This will tip things forward, and getting that data, access to that data, the entry of that data, taking away institutional barriers, those are things that even if all of us want to do them, just because of the regulations around where we work and what we do limit us. And I think this is something that where the UMDF is able to go in and serve as that steward and be able to push this forward in a way that gets us all access to this information, and then hopefully with this information to build on it and get a little bit closer to what we've all been hoping for.
Yeah, thank you, Sumit, for those comments. And ultimately, it's the mitochondrial disease patient community that benefits from it all. Whether it's NAMDAC, a clinical research network, the Mitochondrial Care Network, really about optimizing clinical care, MSeqDR, focused on driving diagnoses and understanding the genetic underpinnings of mitochondrial disease, and now Treat Mito, a really important project for bringing all these different data sets together in a way that would allow us to learn from all these various efforts. So thank you to all of you for joining the panel today. I'm going to bring it to a close, and we'll be sharing our closing comments with you for Friday, just after this break. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, Phil, a busy day. I want to download a little bit from the day, but first I do want to remind our patient families as we're wrapping the programming for today to head over to those happy hour patient voice networking rooms. You can find those rooms on your agenda. So head over to the lobby, check out the agenda. You'll see the little buttons to go to the various days. Well, as mentioned, Phil, a very busy day, so much great discussion, particularly around clinical trials that really interest me as I was thinking a lot about how we talk about how we have entered into this clinical era of mitochondrial disease. And today was certainly a testament to so much activity going on.
Yeah, again, you can't help but reflect back a few short years ago. We were lucky to have one or two updates on the platform. Right. And now, 3 panel discussions, 4 or 5 panelists on each one. And, I think you and I both know that there's more to come. And, right. Maybe that drives some of the urgency and in the programming and what we described, but it's an exciting time. I really hope the patient community comes away from this with that feeling of empowerment, right? That there's research coming that can help them, and really exciting to be a part of it.
Well, certainly what it drives us to do at UMDF is keep pace with this activity, right? We've had to find new ways to make sure that we're promoting this type of activity that's out there, making the community aware. Of course, mitochondrial medicine virtual is just one way that we're doing that. We talked earlier about Mito University and the new umdf.org. And pleased to share too, this is a focus of ours that you're going to see some improvements and developments over the summer as well too. Some new resources on MitoU around clinical trials. We're creating a clinical trials specific hub on umdf.org, and something that's really neat that I'm excited about that's going to be coming to our site here later this summer is a new clinical trials finder tool to make this even easier for patient families to locate clinical trials, connect with sites, and just make that process that much smoother. We talk so much about how it's important that we have a patient community who's ready, willing, and available to enter into these trials. And we know through our history that they are. So now that this activity is here, we want to make it even easier for people to enroll. And of course, it dovetails nicely into some of the other things we talked about today, the genetic testing program, the impending launch of MitoShare. Again, trying to find one-stop opportunities for folks to get information and really kind of help move themselves along in this process. Well, Phil, there's been so much that we've talked about today, and I think about some of the common themes here. We have certainly celebrated today. I think that goes back to our reflection. We certainly are mindful to remember as well. But as we've shared throughout the day, we are ready to rally, right? We're laser locked, so to speak, on the next few steps. And I'd love for you just to share some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I kicked it off that way, and that we're rightfully so. We should be so proud of the past 25 years, and and for what Chuck Mohan accomplished and starting UMDF and growing it through those years. And I know how humbled I am to be a part of this and in my journey through mitochondrial disease. But here we are. It's 2021, and mitochondrial disease is still a very serious ailment that is in desperate need, a huge unmet medical need, and we can't slow down. And it's not even just about going faster, it is about constantly reinventing. And I know we have that shared passion to continue to grow and evolve an organization like UMDF to meet the needs of the patient community, partner as necessary to make that happen. We can't possibly do it on our own. And I think, we sure planted a lot of seeds today for where there are those kinds of opportunities. And I just can't wait to kind of dig in and get all these new tools to work in the coming years.
Well, very well put, Phil. Again, with celebrating our 25th, I think it's only appropriate that we propose a toast.
Good idea.
A toast to reflection.
I just so happen to have this little...
How convenient. Sparkling water for us today. As it's a busy day today and a busy day tomorrow, we hope folks will come back. But I'd like to propose a toast to reflection, to remembering, and of course, to rally. Most importantly, though, a toast to each and every single one of you. Thanks so much for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Hi everyone, this is Mitochondrial Medicine 2021 Virtual Junior Host Brene Wilkinson. I hope you enjoyed today's presentations as much as I did. So come back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern for Mitochondrial Medicine 2021 Virtual.